This is where the Dutch came to die. These sands, these beaches and this coast was a place of mutiny, murder, starvation and cannibalism. When Vermeer was only 15, the story of the loss of the Dutch East India ship Batavia with 260,000 guilders of treasure was published. When he was 23, the Gilt Dragon or Virgul Drukt, another Dutch East India Company ship laden with trade goods and treasure, hit a reef just north of here. These stories were the 17th century equivalent of a spaceship full of people crashing on the moon. The young Vermeer would certainly have heard of this land of death. Now, I'm not going to tell you that my little painting came here on a sailing ship, but it did come from out there. In fact, it came from the other side of this ocean. You see, this little painting came here from Africa. Welcome back to Vermeer's Child, where in this episode we're going to look at the places this little child has travelled. But first, let's spend a minute or two just understanding what provenance really looks like and what weight we should be giving to it when considering old master paintings. This is a chart showing when each of Vermeer's paintings first became known as a Vermeer. Those with broken provenance are marked in red. I've had to make a few guesses about when some paintings were known to be by Vermeer, but regardless, the pattern remains the same for him and for many early artists. There are a few absolutely certain paintings, and more still that have a quite certain history, and a lot, probably as many as half, that a talented forger could drive a truck through because of the time that elapsed prior to the firm attribution. And in many ways, Vermeer's easier to document because he had a small output, currently of only 37 paintings. More than half of his paintings were auctioned together only 20 years after he died, and there were some prominent collectors who held his paintings. Yet about half of the known works have significant early gaps in their histories. Now, I don't doubt the attribution of any of his 37 surviving works, but the point I want to make is that ultimately it wasn't provenance that made the paintings into Vermeer's, it was Vermeer who made them into Vermeer's. The truth of a painting's connections to an artist is hard baked into it, but we have to be able to see it for what it is. So where did this painting come from? Well, before I bought the painting in Western Australia, it was owned by another local man, and my understanding is that he brought it to Australia from Kenya. My only contact with him was via the auctioneer, so I don't know his full name, but I do have his surname. He advised that the painting was bought in the 1960s in Nairobi, Kenya, at a sale conducted by Mutter and Oswald. Mutter and Oswald were basically what we now call real estate agents and auctioneers, so it's possible that the sale was of a whole house and contents. That timing fits well with the exodus of white settlers from Kenya that was sparked by the country's independence in 1963. His family, presumably a parent, also bought another painting at the Kenya sale, a painting attributed to an artist named Prina that's an unusually Catholic subject of a casual gathering of 4 or 5 cardinals in a room attended by a monk. Kenya was subject to a land grab, particularly by wealthy Anglo-Irish aristocrats, commencing in the early 1900s, which continued with large numbers of ex-servicemen allocated land in the colony after each of the 2 world wars. Away from the strictures of their upbringing and social classes, many of these settlers cut loose, resulting in notorious scandals centred around the Happy Valley set. You might recall the movie White Mischief and the book and movie Out of Africa that capture something of those times. You would have to think that whoever took this painting and the painting of the cardinals to Kenya was someone who planned to live surrounded by considerable comfort. A clue to the painting's origin before it visited Africa is the small Lever Gallery sticker on the back. The previous owner indicated that the other Cardinals painting also had such a sticker, so it's assumed that they were both purchased from Lever Gallery, perhaps in Bournemouth, by whomever it was that took them out to Africa. Lever Gallery was owned by Sidney Isaac Lever and Louis Lever, 2 Lithuanian émigrés. In 1911, both brothers were naturalised under the surname Lever, and they later served in the First World War. Their address at that time was recorded as 41 and 42 High Street, Burton-upon-Trent, a brewery town in the Midlands of England. Lewis was a fine art dealer in Burton-upon-Trent, and later on the west coast at Southport, and Sidney became a fine art dealer based in Bournemouth. But Lever Gallery sold huge numbers of paintings in multiple locations through sales and auctions throughout the Midlands and south of England. By early 1937, the Bournemouth Gallery had moved twice to its eventual location at 7 Westover Road, which is the address on the label, with the telephone number 465. It's possible that the move took place as early as 1932, so the painting was sold probably sometime after that date, but because sales were held in multiple locations, it isn't clear whether it was actually sold from Bournemouth. The gallery ceased operating in 1979, by which time the name was Winter Lever Galleries. Sydney's daughter ran the gallery after his death in 1966, which is probably when the name was changed. So we know that Lever Gallery sold the painting, and the sale was very likely in the period of Kenyan colonisation and land annexation. But because of the very large numbers of paintings sold by the Levers, I can't be certain that it was a Bournemouth sale and not a sale at one of many other places that the brothers held sales. At one 1930 sale, there were 500 paintings, and another in 1932 had 300. So identifying who sold or consigned it to the Levers is a significant challenge. But in the next episode, we're going to shed some light on that problem with a bombshell finding that makes things both clearer and more obscure at the same time. Because it turns out that there's a third signature on the painting. So please subscribe if you haven't, and as always, thanks very much for watching.